Well, I guess I will introduce myself. So I'm Dr. Hannah Penn. I joined the USDA in, I guess, early July in 2020 as the new research entomologist. I just moved up from South Texas, although I was in Louisiana like a year or two before that, doing some honeybee IPM work. But a lot of what I'll be talking today is a lot of stuff that Randy's been doing in conjunction with Dr. Wilson and Dr. Johnson. So I've kind of jumped into the middle of some of these tests that were ongoing, and we'll have some new stuff next year as well. So first I want to talk about our nitrogen test in HOMA. So this is very similar to what Blake was talking about. And so here I have it split out by the varieties, but it's the same two varieties. We have 540 and 299. So this is the proportion of bored internodes. So you can see that 540 has more borer damage than the 299, but we didn't actually see a treatment by variety treatment effect that was significant, although you can kind of see with the 299 there might have been a little bump at 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Are we not going forward here? And then if we look at the different varieties and treatments by the actual sugar, pounds of sugar per acre, we see again that you have some nitrogen-based results, but you're not really having an influence of that borer damage based on the variety. And now I'll go into our plant cane that we harvested for this year. So we had some newer varieties in there. We have some 14 and 15 varieties. One thing I want to point out with this borer damage is the only really significant differences we had was this new variety L15306 had our highest amount of borer damage when we compared it to another new one, this L14267. But overall, we didn't have a huge amount of borer damage. So this might be one of those things that, later years will give us a little bit more information as we get a little bit more borer pressure in there. And so this is the differences in sugar content for those different varieties. So I want to note that we didn't actually have any statistically significant impacts if we're thinking of our p-value equals 0.05, but for variety, we did have this marginal effect. So that might come out in later years if we have a little bit more stress or we have lower sugar production overall. So we'll have to see what that looks like in the first stubble next year. Again, this was the plant cane. If we want to look at the treated versus untreated canes, we split this into treated for borers and untreated. So this red dotted line at 0, so that's representing the amount of sugar produced by the treated cane. And then if the amount is above that, then the untreated cane actually produced better than the treated cane, and lower than that would be the untreated cane produced worse, which is generally what we would expect. If you have lots of borer pressure and you don't treat it, then you would have less sugar in your cane. But again, we didn't have any statistical differences. Really, we had some variety differences, but in terms of the differences between treatment and untreated, that wasn't statistically significant. And again, it might be because we had relatively low borer pressure on this one. But you can kind of see how these different groups are trending. So now I'm going to talk about, we have a study with Rio Farms down in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, where we are looking at Mexican rice borer versus plant cane. So this is actually something I started working on before I joined the USDA. I got brought in because I was down in South Texas. And so this is kind of similar. We have the treated versus untreated for some of the varieties that they have down in South Texas. And you can see here in the red, these are all our untreated, and they have much higher borer pressure than the treated varieties of the same kind. And in general, like Blake was saying, that 201 had the greatest borer pressure, and this is mostly your Mexican rice borer. But also that 855 and 710 had pretty decent damage as well. So we had some variety impacts, some treatment impacts. So obviously our treatment was pretty beneficial there, and some variety by treatment impacts. So some of these varieties benefited a little bit more. And so I'm going to be presenting the hand-cut TRS, so the Texas folks actually won't get around to getting us the plot weights and the mill data until probably next week. So be on the lookout for that for more of this information. So you do see we have some differences in TRS. And it's not directly related to treatment across the board. This one is actually dependent on the variety interaction with the treatment, as well as the total board internode damage. And so again, if we look at this red line is the baseline of how well these plants are doing in the treated plots. You can see that if we leave them untreated, this CP72-1210, it actually, it really needs that treatment to do well. But we didn't see any statistically significant differences in treated versus untreated for the other varieties quite as much. But some of this is due to these differences in board internode damage and TRS based on the varieties. So this 1210, if it has very few board internodes, seems to do a little bit better on TRS than when it has a lot of board internodes, versus some of these other varieties seem to be able to be a little bit more tolerant of borer damage even when they have quite a bit. So with that, I'd like to thank, in addition to the LSU folks who helped me out quite a bit on my first year here, our ARS staff, Rio Farms, who again we've been working with a lot on this Texas data, as well as Dr. Johnson. And if you need my new contact information, there it is.